"Is this some kind of joke, Colonel?" The words, sharp and laced with disbelief, cut through the oppressive heat shimmering off the flight line. Chief Warrant Officer Evans, his face a mask of professional frustration, stared not at his commanding officer, but at the old man standing beside him. The old man, Theodore Brewer, seemed unfazed by the heat, the roar of distant jets, or the scorn in the young officer's voice. He was a relic, clad in faded, grease-stained coveralls that had seen better decades. His hands, thick with calluses and mapped with the fine lines of 1,000 repairs, hung calmly at his sides. He simply looked at the silent beast before them, an H-64 Apache, the apex of modern aerial warfare, rendered as inert as a museum piece by a ghost in its own machine. Colonel Davies sighed, the sound barely audible over the whine of a C-130 taxiing in the distance. "Chief, this is Mr. Brewer. He's here to offer a second opinion." Evans let out a short, incredulous laugh. "A second opinion? Sir, with all due respect, my team has been over this bird for 72 hours straight. We've run every diagnostic known to man. We've swapped the FADEC, boroscoped the turbine, checked every millimeter of the fuel lines, and replaced half the sensors. The digital logs are clean. The machine says there is nothing wrong with it, yet the Port T700 engine won't cycle past 50% on spool-up. We have engineers from General Electric on a video link. What we don't need is," he gestured vaguely at Theodore, "analog assistance." Theodore's gaze never left the Apache. He was 80-something years old, his face a testament to a life lived under harsh suns and immense pressure. His eyes, though clouded slightly with age, possessed a focus that was unnerving. They weren't just looking at the helicopter, they were studying its posture, the way it sat on its landing gear, the subtle sheen of its composite skin. He was listening to its silence. A small crowd of younger mechanics had gathered at a respectful distance. They were the best of the best, digital natives who could interface with a billion-dollar weapon system through a ruggedized laptop. They had been defeated by this enigma, their confidence eroded with every failed engine test. Now they watched this strange tableau, a mixture of curiosity and the same derision their superior officer was so openly displaying. Whispers rippled through them. Who was the old man? Some retired legend the colonel knew? A good luck charm? "Let him look, Chief," Davies said, his voice now carrying a hard edge of command that Evans could not ignore. Evans gritted his teeth and stepped back with a flourish of theatrical defeat. "Fine. The flight line is yours, Mr. Brewer. Just please, try not to touch anything. It's a very sensitive piece of equipment." Theodore gave the colonel a slow, deliberate nod of thanks and began to walk. He didn't head for the open engine cowling where Evans's team had been focused. Instead, he started at the tail, his gnarled fingers gently tracing the line of the stabilator. He moved with a slow, shuffling grace, a man completely at home in this world of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid. His every movement was economical, his attention absolute. He circled the Apache, his head cocked as if listening for a secret. The young mechanics exchanged smirks. He looked like a farmer checking his prize bull, not a technician diagnosing a turboshaft engine. He finally arrived at the port side, stopping below the engine that had tormented the base's finest for 3 days. He didn't look up at the complex array of tubes, wires, and blades. He knelt down, his old knees cracking in protest, and looked underneath, at the place where the engine housing met the fuselage. "Flashlight," he said. His voice was gravelly, unused. A young sergeant, eager to break the tension, scrambled to hand him a high-powered LED torch. Evans rolled his eyes, crossing his arms. "Sir, we've had military-grade imaging equipment in there. I assure you a flashlight isn't going to reveal anything we missed." Theodore ignored him. He took the light and played its beam across the underbelly of the aircraft. He wasn't just looking, he was observing how the light reflected, how it caught the edges of rivets and seams. He laid one hand flat against the metal skin of the helicopter, closing his eyes. The mechanics saw an old man touching an airplane. Colonel Davies saw a master communing with a machine. He had heard the stories, whispers from old-timers about a man they called the Ghost, a mechanic from the Vietnam era who could feel a hairline fracture through 3 inches of steel. He had made the call to bring Theodore here as a last resort, a desperate prayer to a forgotten god of the flight line. After a full minute of this silent communion, Theodore opened his eyes. He pushed himself slowly to his feet. He reached into the deep pocket of his coveralls and pulled out a small, worn leather roll. He untied it with practiced fingers. Inside, nestled in soft cloth, were not the gleaming, laser-etched tools of a modern mechanic, but a collection of oddly shaped, hand-forged instruments, polished smooth by decades of use. Evans's jaw tightened. What in God's name are those? Theodore selected one. It was a long, slender piece of metal, bent at a precise, unnatural angle, its tip ground to a razor's fineness. It looked more like a dental pick forged in a blacksmith's shop than a tool for an Apache. "You are not putting that thing anywhere near my engine," Evans snapped, his professional composure finally shattering. "That's it. I'm calling this. Sir, I appreciate your effort, but this is a waste of everyone's time." As Theodore held the strange tool in his hand, the sunlight glinting off its hand-polished surface, the world seemed to slow for a moment. The whine of the distant jet faded, replaced by the thumping rotor wash of a Huey in a monsoon. The acrid smell of jet fuel was suddenly mixed with the damp, metallic scent of blood and fear. He wasn't on a pristine American flight line. He was in a muddy clearing in the Ashau Valley, rain plastering his hair to his face. A young pilot, his face pale with shock, was screaming over the storm. "We have to go. They're coming." The Huey's engine was sputtering, a critical linkage severed by a piece of shrapnel. There were no spare parts, no tools, just the wreckage of a burned-out truck nearby. In his mind's eye, he saw his younger self hammering a red-hot piece of leaf spring against a rock, shaping it, grinding it, creating the very tool he now held in his hand. He had used it to bypass the damaged linkage, a fix that should have been impossible, and the Huey had lifted off just as the enemy broke through the trees, carrying a dozen wounded men to safety. The tool wasn't just metal. It was a memory. It was a promise. Back in the present, Sergeant Miller, a young but sharp mechanic who had been watching the entire exchange, felt a knot of anger tighten in his stomach. He had seen the way Evans was treating the old man, the sheer disrespect. But he had also seen the look in Mr. Brewer's eyes. It was a look of deep, unshakable certainty. Miller had seen that look once before, in the eyes of a bomb disposal technician about to disarm a complex IED. It was the look of a man who saw a different reality than everyone else, a world of cause and effect invisible to the untrained eye. Evans took a step toward Theodore, his hand raised as if to physically stop him. "Mr. Brewer, I am ordering you to step away from the aircraft. You are a civilian, and you are interfering with a critical piece of military hardware. Do not make me call the security forces." This was the final humiliation, the ultimate overreach. The threat of arrest hung in the hot, still air. The other mechanics shifted uncomfortably. This had gone from a curiosity to a crisis. Miller knew he couldn't challenge a chief warrant officer directly. It would be his career, but he couldn't just stand by and watch this happen. He subtly pulled out his phone, keeping it low and out of Evans's line of sight. His fingers flew across the screen, sending a text message not to a friend, but to the colonel's executive aide, a man he knew was monitoring the situation from the command tower. The message was brief and urgent. "Sir, CWO Evans is about to have Mr. Brewer escorted off the flight line by SF. He's threatening to detain him. The colonel needs to get back down here now. I think the old man found it. I really think he found it." He hit send. The message flew across the base's network, a digital spark of rebellion. In that moment, the audience and Sergeant Miller knew something Evans and his crew did not. Help was on the way. The balance of power was about to shift, and the quiet dignity of the unassuming hero was about to be vindicated in the most spectacular way imaginable. Inside the climate-controlled quiet of the base command building, Colonel Davies stormed back into his office, his face grim. His aide met him at the door, phone in hand. "Sir," a text from Sergeant Miller on the flight line. Davies snatched the phone and read the message. His expression hardened. "Get me the base archives, now." The aide, already anticipating the command, had the number on speed dial. A moment later, a reedy voice answered. "Archives, Specialist Rowe speaking." "Rowe, this is Colonel Davies. I need a service file lookup. Brewer, Theodore, Brewer. He would have served from the late 60s to the early 80s. Aviation maintenance." There was a frantic clicking of a keyboard on the other end. "One moment, sir. Got it. Brewer, Theodore. Wow. Okay, sir. This file is extensive. Read me the commendation, Specialist," Davies ordered, pacing behind his desk. "Yes, sir. Let's see. Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, Distinguished Flying Cross, 16 air medals, one with a V for Valor, Purple Heart with 2 oak leaf clusters. Sir, the list of commendations is 4 pages long." Davies stopped pacing. "What about the citations, the narratives?" "Right. The Distinguished Service Cross citation reads, 'For extraordinary heroism in action, on the 12th of March 1969, Specialist Brewer, with complete disregard for his own safety, remained with a downed medevac helicopter under intense enemy fire. For 6 hours, using improvised tools forged from wreckage, he repaired a catastrophically damaged rotor assembly and a severed fuel line, enabling the evacuation of 9 critically wounded soldiers. Sir, There's more, a dozen more just like it. Field expedient engine swaps under fire, landing gear repairs during active engagements. They called him the ghost of the A Shao because he could make dead birds fly again. Davies felt a chill run down his spine despite the office's cool air. He had known Brewer was good, but this was the stuff of legend. He was standing on the shoulders of a giant and hadn't even realized the man's true stature. There's a note here from a General Peterson, the specialist added. It seems he was one of the pilots Brewer saved. The note just says, if this man ever asks for anything, give it to him. He is the finest battlefield mechanic this army has ever produced. Full stop. Davies hung up the phone. His aide looked at him, eyes wide. Sir? Get my car, Davies commanded. And get 4-star General Peterson on the phone. Tell him a ghost from his past is on our flight line, and he's being threatened with arrest. Back on the tarmac, the confrontation had reached its peak. Theodore, holding his strange handmade tool, had ignored Evans's threat completely. He was pointing with its delicate tip toward a spot deep within the engine's guts, a place buried under a nest of wires and conduits. There, Theodore said, his voice calm. The bleed air valve's pneumatic line. There's a crack. Evans squinted, his face red with fury. That's impossible. We scoped that entire section twice. The fiber optics showed nothing. There is no crack. He stepped forward, his body blocking Theodore's access. That's it. I've had enough. Sergeant, he barked at one of the younger mechanics. Go get the security forces. Tell them we have an unauthorized civilian interfering with military property. The young sergeant froze, looking from the furious chief warrant officer to the impossibly calm old man, and then to the silent colonel who had brought him there. It was an illegal order, but it was an order nonetheless. But before he could move, a new sound cut through the air. Not a jet engine or a helicopter, but the squeal of tires on asphalt. A black command vehicle, a Ford Expedition with official government plates, was driving directly onto the flight line, breaking a dozen protocols. It screeched to a halt just yards from the Apache. The mechanic snapped to attention. Evans spun around, his mouth agape at the breach of regulations. Colonel Davies emerged from the passenger side, his face like thunder. But it was the man who emerged from the back seat that caused every jaw on the flight line to drop. He was an older man, but he moved with a powerful, coiled energy. He wore a flight suit, and on his shoulders were the 4 gleaming stars of a full general. His face was a mask of grim purpose. It was General Peterson, the visiting commander from Army Futures Command. The sight of a 4-star general appearing unannounced on an active flight line was so unprecedented it was like seeing a unicorn. The world seemed to stop. The wind died down. The distant hum of the bass faded into nothing. Evans's anger evaporated, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. He snapped the most rigid salute of his life. General, sir, I was not aware you were. General Peterson didn't even look at him. He strode right past the saluting chief warrant officer, his eyes locked on one man. He walked past the state-of-the-art helicopter, past the assembled crew of expert technicians, and stopped directly in front of Theodore Brewer. The entire flight line held its breath. The 4-star general, a man who commanded armies and advised presidents, clicked his heels together. He raised his hand to his brow and delivered the sharpest, most respectful salute Evans had ever witnessed. It was a salute of profound deference, a gesture from a subordinate to a superior, though no rank insignia graced Theodore's faded coveralls. Teddy? The general's voice was thick with emotion. My God, it's really you. Theodore slowly lowered his tool. A flicker of recognition sparked in his ancient eyes. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Pete, you got old. A choked laugh escaped the general. He dropped his salute and looked at the stunned faces of the mechanics around him. His voice boomed across the tarmac, each word a hammer blow of truth. Men, you have the privilege of standing in the presence of a living legend. This is Theodore Brewer. When I was a 23-year-old captain, my bird went down in the Ia Drang Valley. We were surrounded, taking heavy fire with multiple wounded. No one could get to us. But Teddy Brewer flew in on a dust-off Huey that had no business being in the air. He landed under a hail of bullets, jerry-rigged our busted engine with nothing but a Leatherman and some wire, and then flew his own bird out with mine flying shaky escort, saving 18 American lives. The man you see before you is not a mechanic. He is a miracle worker. He turned to Colonel Davies. Colonel, read the man's citation. I want everyone to hear it. Davies pulled out his phone, his hands steady. His voice was clear and strong as he read the official account of the Distinguished Service Cross, the story of the impossible repair under fire, the quiet heroism that had never sought a spotlight. As he read, the smirks on the faces of the young mechanics melted away, replaced by expressions of pure, unadulterated awe. They weren't looking at a crazy old man anymore. They were looking at a giant. When Davies finished, a profound silence settled over the group. The general's gaze, now as cold and hard as granite, fell upon Chief Warrant Officer Evans. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The quiet menace in his tone was more terrifying than any shout. "Chief," he began, his voice dangerously low, "you have millions of dollars of diagnostic equipment. You have laptops that can measure the tolerance of a turbine blade to a millionth of an inch, but none of that equipment can teach you to listen. None of it can teach you humility, and none of it can teach you respect." He gestured with his chin toward Theodore. "This man's hands have forgotten more about keeping men alive by keeping these machines in the air than you will ever learn from a computer screen. Your diagnostics told you nothing was wrong." He listened to the silence, and it told him everything. "You failed because you thought you were smarter than the machine." He succeeded because he knew he wasn't. The public rebuke was complete, delivered in front of Evans's entire team. The chief warrant officer's face, once red with anger, was now pale with shame. He looked at the ground, unable to meet the general's eyes. Just then, Theodore Brewer, the object of all this veneration, took a shuffling step forward. He looked at the humiliated young officer, and his voice, when it came, was not one of triumph, but of gentle instruction. "It's not your fault, son," he said, and the kindness in his tone was perhaps the most surprising thing of all. "The machines are loud. The computers are loud. You were trained to listen to all that noise. But the machine, it always whispers the truth. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it." He held up his handmade tool, the one forged in the crucible of war. "Your scope couldn't see the crack because it's a pressure fracture. It only opens when the pneumatic line is under the specific stress of a 50% spool-up. It's invisible when the engine is cold and static. Your diagnostics are looking for a state of being. I was listening for a moment of becoming, the moment it becomes broken." As he spoke, another memory surfaced, sharp and clear. The memory not of making the tool, but of using it. His younger self in that muddy clearing, pressing the tool's tip against the damaged linkage of the Huey. He wasn't just looking. His fingers, his entire arm had become a sensor, feeling the subtle, discordant vibration, the tiny tremor that told him where the metal was weakest. The tool wasn't just a wrench, it was an extension of his own senses, a conduit for wisdom born of pure, desperate necessity. He had learned to feel the breaking point. Back on the hot tarmac, he looked at Evans. "You don't find a problem like this with your eyes. You find it with your hands." In the immediate aftermath, everything moved with a new and profound sense of purpose. Following Theodore's precise instructions, a maintenance crew, including a now silent and humbled CWO Evans, carefully removed the indicated pneumatic line. There, under a microscope in the maintenance bay, was the fracture. It was almost invisible to the naked eye, a hairline crack no thicker than a spider's thread, but it was exactly where Theodore had said it would be. The part was replaced. The Apache's cowling was sealed. With General Peterson and Colonel Davies watching, the pilot initiated the startup sequence. The port engine spooled up, whining past 50%, then 60, then 80, until it settled into a perfect, stable, deafening roar. The ghost in the machine had been exorcised. General Peterson turned to Colonel Davies. "I want a new mandatory training module developed for every maintenance crew on this base, and I want it distributed to the entire Army Aviation Branch. Call it Advanced Tactile Diagnostics and Intuitive Engineering. And the lead instructor," he said, placing a hand on Theodore's shoulder, "will be Mr. Brewer if he'll accept the paid position." The next day, a formal base-wide commendation was issued, not only honoring Theodore for his discovery, but also officially documenting his legendary service record for a new generation. CWO Evans was not disciplined in the traditional sense. His punishment was to be the first student enrolled in Theodore's new class. Weeks later, the scene was much quieter. Inside the base's main workshop, Evans stood before a workbench, clumsily trying to use a hand file on a small block of aluminum. His movements were jerky, uncertain. He was trying to replicate one of the simple handmade tools from Theodore's leather roll, and failing miserably. A shadow fell over the bench. Theodore stood beside him, holding a steaming mug of coffee. He watched for a moment, then set his mug down. He didn't say a word about the incident on the flight line. He simply reached out and gently adjusted Evans's grip on the file. "Easy now," the old man said, his voice a low rumble. "Don't fight it. Let the tool do the work. Feel how it wants to cut." Under the old veteran's guidance, Evans's strokes became smoother, more confident. He was still clumsy, but for the first time, he wasn't just forcing the tool against the metal. He was listening to it. He was beginning to understand. In the quiet of the workshop, away from the pressure and the noise, a different kind of repair was taking place. one of mentorship, humility, and the timeless transfer of wisdom. Theodore Brewer's story is a powerful reminder that the greatest tools we have are not always found in a box but in the hands and hearts of those who came before us. True expertise is earned in fire, not just downloaded from a screen. If you were inspired by this story of unassuming valor, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Veteran Valor Stories, and share it with someone who appreciates the quiet masters among us.